Fuck it.
Lick it. Pull it actually works.
Whip it.
Whip it. Pierce it.
Ah! You really have to shout at it? It says shout it?
I think it said lick it.
Gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe, here in this great hall of justice, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled.
Pop rocks.
Hell oh.
Hello. Me. Hi. That's me. Deb to Deb.
Juanito.
Sorry. How would you respond?
Yank it. Twist it.
What? No, I was totally on it.
Were you on it?
Cup it.
100 my butt.
Okay. Deb?
Penises.
Penises. You have a lot of pop when you say penises.
Penis. I don't know about anything.
You don't know about penises? I suspect different. It appears that we're recording.
Hold on to your buttholes. This might get weird.
Salutations. You're for some reason listening to Furk'd in the Burt, a voyage to Uranus. What is wrong with you? Stop now. This is a podcast by Portland, Oregon's worst band, Molly Bang, who would rather yak about music than actually rehearse. Shit. All of you, stop now. This is a podcast by Portland, Oregon's worst band, Molly Bang, who would rather yak about music than actually rehearse. Shit.
Does Joe need to know anything?
Where is he? Is he smoking?
Joe knows a lot from what I understand.
So if I'm standing right here talking, does that affect anything?
It's better if it goes straight in. So like I could move.
Because sometimes when it goes in at an angle, it kind of...
Yeah, that's bad, isn't it? That's my thing.
Disappointed.
I know.
I don't even
It
know you
always
anything.
disappoints people when I miss it, especially the lobs.
I can sit on the floor over here if you want.
Nah, man.
Stretch out.
Sit like a cat.
Roofie myself.
Didn't you already do that with what's in the bag?
I have the ability to roofie myself.
I feel like I tried that one for a while. But I didn't know it was a roofie thing.
Is that a thing? Roofing off?
No, roofinol is the
Oh,
drug.
I thought you said roofing off.
Is it really?
Like I'm going to do it to myself. I'm roofing off.
Rohypnol, yeah.
No, yeah, it's Rohypnol.
Where does
It's
the word
a
roofie come
sleeping
from?
pill in Europe.
I know, yeah, I used to get it.
Because I have a vagina.
Previously on Furk'd in the Bed.
Oh, because you don't want your dick to just fly off. I'm seeing this from a different lens because I have a vagina.
Do you?
We were going to touch tips.
God, every time.
Just touch and then nothing else.
Yeah, but you can't look at each other when you touch tips.
Just for a second.
You have
Split
to look
second and
away.
then done.
They didn't have sharks yet.
They didn't fart and poop at the same time.
8 assholes with 8 dicks going into those assholes with 8 assholes under it with 8 dicks going into that.
You never buy jewelry off of somebody in a parking lot.
What do you buy in a parking lot?
Hookers.
Okay.
Crack.
Okay. I'll give you an $1,800 blowjob for $20.
Feels so great when someone puts their dick in your nose.
Lie to me, Pinocchio. Yeah, and you know, modern lady dwarves are also in a lot of porn.
What?
And I watch 5 hours of porn every night.
$5 worth of porn?
$5 worth of porn.
Pop it.
We have not discussed how to introduce this stuff. Would we like something consistent like, hey, we're reading the blah-bitty-blah-blah book?
The formal introduction thing, I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah.
I'm so-and-so. This is so... Because people don't...
It doesn't matter really either.
I feel like when I've listened to podcasts, they're just getting started, and they're like, I'm Dave, and this is John. To me, it sounds a little narcissistic.
Yeah, but I mean, the medium of podcasting and that sort of thing is a little narcissistic, just in general.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to be heard.
You're
Like being in a band.
You're literally making something to make people listen to you.
Yeah, that's a good argument. I guess I feel less narcissistic if I...
Have no pants.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, what if everyone makes their introductions and then when you make yours, you're like, I have no name. That was a joke.
I mean, do you guys really care if we have our names?
I
think
don't
people
care
need
at
to know.
all if my name is in it because I'm not a celebrity that's trying to brand myself. So
So how do you want to start it then?
So, Deb, we were thinking that since you picked this book, you should tell us
I didn't pick
what
this
it is.
book.
I thought you did.
No, I said yes to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are terrible. There's one of my conference call people just puts his nose on it.
I'll just hold my breath.
There you go. Just hold your breath the whole time.
So who did pick this book? Who picked this book? Scott, did you pick this book?
I said you guys had to read this.
Had you read it prior to saying that?
No. How did it come up in
Are you glad
conversation?
that you said that since
I like the book, honestly.
I think, didn't we want a female, right?
Yeah.
After the testosterone of Joey Shithead.
Maybe definitely more drug-induced perspective than
Yes.
Yeah, more
Joey
drugs.
way more drugs. No, I had to look up drugs I didn't know about.
Such as?
I remember that it was like a red and blue caplet and that it's mentioned in Fight Club. I Wikipedia'd it. It was one of those rich pills. It was like a way to get high
Mandrix?
from a doctor.
Mandrix?
Maybe? Yeah,
I'm looking
I think
in
so.
the index has a list of all the drugs mentioned under drugs.
I think that's it. Yeah.
How many are there?
Well,
Let's look.
we have
What's your
heroin.
favorite drug on here?
The Brompton cocktail I've heard of before. That was like a favorite of the Brompton contingent, which was the Susie and the Banshee crowd at one point. And these were legal. I mean, the Brompton cocktail was like something you'd get from the pharmacist, and it's crazy. It's described in here. I'll find it.
I just
Well, it was
realized
interesting
her,
to me.
Go ahead. I just realized her initials were MF. That's MF's first exposure to heroin, Narcotics Anonymous, Brompton cocktail, morphine, cocaine, LSD, Mandrax. Mandrax?
Mm-hmm.
MF is junkie, dealers, sleeping pills, suicide attempts, mescaline, big time consumption starts, methanol, prescription, treatment, procaine? What's that?
It's like a kind of a cocaine offshoot. It numbs
She
you.
talks about that in the book.
It numbs
about
you.
how it's
Like professional cocaine?
like it kind of sucks. It was a fake cocaine and it froze her vocal cords.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. When
Was
she was
procaine,
on
and she thought it was
SNL
cocaine.
or...
Yes. It was
Yeah,
an
she
SNL
went up to
story.
sing and
And everyone
she
was
froze.
like, whoa, that was cool what you did with your voice.
Yep.
Okay, that's it. Sorry, Dave.
Brompton cocktail, half morphine, half cocaine.
There you go. Upper and a downer.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing to me that up until 65 or even 68, I don't remember the date, but cocaine was legal from pharmacies in London.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those drugs were legal from pharmacies in London.
They had scripts, right? I mean, I think Keith Richards was the one who talked about he doesn't have all the problems from his decades of drug abuse because he didn't use street drugs, apparently.
Yeah, he purchased them.
Yep.
Like
So
a
it's
country
better if
music
they're
singer.
not street drugs?
Yeah. Street drugs are mixed with all sorts of stuff that you don't know what's in there, whereas the stuff you get from a pharmacy it's going to be
clean.
pure. Yep.
Yeah, that and the heroin too.
So
I
it's
mean,
healthy drugs.
Yeah.
They're kind of like vitamins.
I didn't know that.
Well, if the doctor gives it to you.
Vitamin H.
Yes.
Vitamin C. Oh, there already is vitamin C.
Shit.
Did you guys do drugs while you were reading the book?
I did some caffeine.
I'm always high, so yes.
This time Molly Bang reads the gosh darn book Faithful by Marianne Faithfull. Eat it, idiot.
Did you guys happen to find a favorite sentence? She uses a lot of big words, usually unnecessarily.
Yes, I both admired and hated her for her vocabulary. It's like
Yeah.
it's very clearly well read. Early on, you asked the question, what's your favorite sentence? Is it the most pretentious one you found so far? A lot of it was very pretentious.
Definitely. Yeah, there was a lot of literary references in here. She talked about The Master and Margarita, which is this book influencing Let It Bleed. So I went and looked up The Master and Margarita and checked that out a little bit. But there was all sorts of fairy tales, a lot of culture. You know, she's trying to pull a lot of culture into the book, and it was really highbrow at times. I mean, for somebody who lived on a wall, and that was one of my favorite parts, is when she's just living on the wall.
Yeah.
Which I also
In
question.
the bombed out building.
I'm
Yeah.
just like, how do you live on a wall?
Yeah,
You
no, that's
know?
obviously just making it more beautiful than it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she definitely like beautified her victimhood, you know, in this a lot. But I like when she tells Dylan that she's been living on a wall. And he's just kind of like, far out, you know. That's pretty much it.
She's at a party and she's seeing people go into the bathroom and they're coming out and sparks are flying off of them, and that she knows very well what's going on in that bathroom, and it's they're doing drugs, and she's looking forward to becoming a junkie, and she mentions it multiple times that she wants to be a junkie. But I remember making a vow to myself then and there that come hell or high water, one day I was going to get into that bathroom. Such a kind of shitty goal in life.
She's trying to pull herself off as this kind of cultured junkie.
Well, it starts in the very beginning when she's claiming to be, you know, lineage from...
Right.
I mean, a lot of people who have to escape their home country say that they're from royalty.
It does answer the question to how are you at all the parties with all the really rich folks early on? When
Yeah.
you're 17 years old and you're at a party with the Rolling Stones and Andrew Loog Oldham when they're already famous and you're not a groupie. That does answer that question.
Yeah.
She mentioned the guy that the Beatles song is about, that he blew his mind out in a car. And I looked him up because I didn't know about this. And on Wikipedia, it calls him a socialite. Is that how you say it? Socialite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is such a funny thing. Like, you hang out with rich people, right? That's what a socialite is.
That's what you
Pretty
do.
much.
That's all you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
get your own Wikipedia page.
You go to parties and you hang out
You-
with people and yeah.
That's because in America we don't have aristocracy, except we do.
It was really frustrating to me how many people in her life that didn't do anything, or let's, you know, spend the summer at my castle, and you can be completely broke and no longer of any prestige, but you were at one point.
Let's take a break and listen to Belinda Davenport from Cho Young and his family of Davenport. Here is more for.
I heard some sad news. I heard you cut your mullet off, and now your marmot has left you. You were so cute together. You both had mullets. Mullet boy, where has your marmot gone? Your marmalade used to taste like Gatorade. What does he think of this? Your military style was a rare style. Your origin. What does he think of this?
I remember the good old days when you'd make marmalade and Gatorade, and we'd sit in the park with you and your mullet, and your marmot, and his mullet, and eat and drink and laugh. It was the best time ever. It was the best time. It was the best time. Say hello to me. We remember the good old days when you had a mullet and a marmot.
Do you think that she worked so hard at writing this and making it sound really intelligent and academic because she was pictured as a groupie, kind of the groupie of the 60s? I feel if I think of people that are considered groupies, she's probably the first name that comes to mind. I think generally when people think of groupies, they think of someone that's attractive, that's kind of an idiot, that just sleeps with famous people.
Yeah.
Because when I was reading it, I felt she was trying to prove something. I think her writing is really good, and I feel I would read more books by her. But there were moments where it was too much. It's like you're trying too hard.
Self-gratifying the whole way through.
Right. I agree with that because it seems like she started out at a party with the Rolling Stones, and then she knows everyone through every music scene that ever hit London, all the way through the Sex Pistols. She was hanging out with the people that were doing the fashion at Sex for McLaren, and even beyond that. It just seemed to me, how is this one person so connected to every single piece of musical history in London?
Yeah.
She got around. But she doesn't want to make it sound like that. She wants to make it sound like she was on even footing with all of these people. That one story where she's in the filming of the Dylan Don't Look Back, the movie, the documentary, the D.A. Pennebaker, she's across the room terrified of Dylan for days, right? I mean, she won't even approach him, but she knows that he wants her there. And it turns out that she says that, and this is one of the funniest parts for me, she says, like, I didn't have sex with Dylan, and he comes out of the room and he tears up this piece of paper and he goes, you're destroying my creative muse.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all.
That was my favorite part, though, that Dylan just threw a fit. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I have heard other stories of Dylan being a D-bag.
Oh, definitely.
What part made you the angriest in the
Oh,
book?
jeez.
If you had to pick one.
I've got one for sure. Her loss of her pregnancy because she was anemic. That kind of put a big bow on it for me of a representation of who she is as a person. And that just really upset me, especially as someone who has struggled with trying to start a family, to have somebody be given a gift like that and then just throw it away because you'd rather go have fun.
I feel like that's the whole book, is her having these great opportunities and once again, time after time, just being a brat and not really realizing how many chances she keeps getting.
Textbook addict.
Yeah.
I just was bothered by her willingness to be a victim throughout the book, her kind of romanticization of being a victim. I marked one part. Well, one example, Brian Jones overdoses, so she has to try to kill herself, right?
Yeah.
The very next day. Who are you? What are you doing? Why do you need to die because he died?
Yeah.
The part that made me angriest was her kid is 2, 3 something, 1, a few months old, and it ends up staying home for a day or two by itself because the nanny, something happened.
The nanny ran off. Yeah. That she went out of town and left it with the nanny, and the nanny, like...
But there was something like she knew the nanny was shitty, or there was something that was kind of questionable. I forget what it was, but she wasn't very apologetic about it. And I assume if you're a kid and you're left alone for a day, that even if you don't remember that, that's extremely traumatic.
Yeah, I feel like it was like a one-sentence conclusion to that situation.
Yeah, she wasn't apologetic about it.
You know, you can go off and have all the fun in the world, but if somebody depends on you, you need to make sure that they're taken care of. And the father, how he just got completely shut out for like the first 5 years or so. While she is letting him get abandoned by nannies, he's got a dad that would be happy to take care of him. Mm-hmm. And if she would just let him be a part of his life, then I'm sure any of these times that she wanted to zip around the globe and leave the child with a nanny, dad would have been happy to be there, but she wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
And there was no point in the book where I felt like there was ever a reason for her to treat him the way that she did.
I think one of my favorite parts in this was learning that Keith Richards plays bass on most of the Stone studio stuff and not Bill Wyman. And I always suspected that up until a certain point, till the Stones made that disco record. You know, I always thought, that's Keith on bass. I just always kind of thought that. And she says that Keith plays bass on mostly all the Stones tracks because Wyman was never interested, you know, in being in the Stones.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool.
I did like how she mentioned random tidbits about how songs came about, how someone was playing this riff and then this happened and this chorus came and verse, and because all the songs she's mentioning are from my favorite albums. And I've read a lot of Sohn stuff, and I didn't hear that kind of stuff. Do you guys think that she pushed her ex out the window?
I think she made him jump. I don't think she
Oh,
told him to
definitely.
jump, but I think he probably jumped when she wasn't in the room. But I think she made it happen.
Maybe I'm listening to too many true crime podcasts, but
The way that she talks about how it looks like a bunch of
the way
flowers
that
makes me
she
feel
was like, at this point she slept with numerous rock stars, probably numerous people, and she's,
With a junkie?
dating this guy she met at Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever, and he's the best sex that she's ever had right before he kills himself.
Yeah.
Come on.
That annoyed me as
That
well.
is not a real story. Yeah.
The discussion about the beautiful flowers
Yeah.
at the bottom of the 36th floor.
Magnolias, I thought.
Ridiculous.
And I feel like if someone opened the window that high up and climbed out to jump out, you'd kind of hear that.
You absolutely would, because there's much, much higher winds high up.
She's just like, yeah, I broke up with him, and then I walked around the house for a little while, and a few hours later I was like, oh, what's Hank doing? I'll go check on him. Oh my God, the window's open. He's down there dead. He jumped out the... Come on.
Well, and that she just happened to see him before ambulances had arrived, before anybody's knocking on her door, before anything has happened to make her realize that there's a problem. She just happens to notice it. Well, that's a busy enough area.
I think we should do a podcast trying to figure out what really happened. We'll interview everyone.
Ooh, that's what we should do. We should do musicians' true crime.
My favorite Marianne Faithfull murder. I was surprised at how many acting roles and how much recording she did.
Yes.
I was very surprised at that, because I kind of thought there was, here's this little tertiary pop star from the 60s I'm interested in reading about, because it's connected to one of my favorite bands of all time. I had no idea how much stuff she had done until reading this.
Creepy crawlers, creepy crawlers, creepy crawlers.
Now, you can make all kinds of lovely things like these with Mattel's wonderful Think Maker. It makes creepy crawlers, spiders, lizards, snakes, dragonflies. Make them yourself with this nice plastic goop. Choose a mold, pour in the goop, heat it, and presto changeo, you've got bugs. Squiggly, squirty bugs. They feel so soft and natural. You get 4 different colors of goop and special paints. Make charming lizard pins or spider rings. You can collect them or spread them around. After all, they are fun for the entire family. Get Mattel's new Thing Maker with creepy crawlers. You can tell it's Mattel. It's swell.
Coming up on Furk'd and the Burt.
Well, it's like the Oprah magazine when it first came out. Oh. Yeah. Oh.
I've taken a lot of drugs, and I can't remember shit from it. All right?
Where they're like, there's not really lesbians. I just sometimes hang out with my friend that's a girl and I'm a girl, and sometimes we cuddle and massage each other and kind of
come sometimes.
Kiss and
she gives me a massage, and then I come, and then I give her a massage, and she comes, and then we cuddle for a while.
You're late for the orgy again.
Mick knew that Keith could hear him in the next room, so he was fucking with Keith. He was just like, you know what I'd like to do is really lick Keith from head to toe, and you know.
You gotta go to the doctor and get an orgasm so you'll calm the fuck down, because you're being an obnoxious bitch right now.
I'm no gynecologist, but I'll take a look.
How would your hand get tired?
Well, because all night you're diddling clits.
Joe, is there a dildo museum somewhere in the world?
I'm in room 606, baby.
Are you saying you want to fuck Joe?
More than once I've said that.
Do you guys listen to any of her music ever?
While reading the book, I was listening to like her Spotify station. Why'd You Do It is a pretty amazing song. I am blown away by how early it came out.
That song is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really good.
What do you guys think about her early music, though?
Wimpy.
Chambery.
Yeah.
I don't find it that inspiring.
Somebody handed her something and told her to sing it. It wasn't
Basically,
anything
right?
that,
Yeah.
it wasn't anything she cared about. It was obvious she didn't care about it.
There's these hit makers that just go, dress like this, here's a song, it's going to be a hit. You
The
know?
Disney pop stars.
Yeah.
The ones that are groomed from a young age to
Yep.
become something. Yeah.
Yeah. I pulled up I didn't know that she sang As Tears Go By until we started this. Actually, before we started it, and you had told me that, John.
Yeah.
And but I pulled it up on YouTube, and I could not imagine a less inspired performance.
Yeah.
She looks like she's about to either fall asleep or maybe sneeze the whole time.
Go back and watch the video of the performance of As Tears Go By when I guess it was Top of the Pops or probably Top of the Pops. I can't remember. She literally was wearing a taffeta dress and her arms were crossed and she was looking down the whole time.
And why were they crossed?
Lack of
Did she
performance.
not show her breasts?
We don't know.
that was
We're not sure.
Oh, gotcha.
We don't know.
It
'Cause
just seemed odd.
that would be really funny if they're like, your breasts are too beautiful and big. You need to cover them with your arms.
Cross your arms. Cross your arms. We don't. No one wants to see giant tits.
And she does like a Jim Morrison thing at the end. She just moves her hand so you can see her arms.
I think it's pretty cool, though, to see what British pop was like at the time. That's one really good thing about the book is that it kind of shows us the time period in England, what the music scene was like.
It did feel like the most boring 60s music I've heard in a very long time.
And it changes a lot over the recordings. I mean, she goes from like this very light, airy voice to, I mean, you know, a drug addled one later on.
That record came out in 79, Broken English, and I've owned it forever. It's been in my collection. I was telling Scott on the way here, I picked it up for $3 somewhere. Never, ever even took it out of the sleeve until I started reading this book, and I like it a lot. It's timely. It's like it fits perfect with what's happening in the Lower East Side music scene in 76 and 77. So she's still a couple years late on that, but I love that record. I think it's really good now that I've listened to it.
Well, it's probably her best effort that stood the test of time and was original.
Vegan probiotic health shake. Just like the devil drinks.
What'd you guys think about the Sister Morphine part? That was one of my favorite parts.
She's like, I just got sick of hearing Mick play that with nothing else.
Yeah.
I frankly think that's awesome. The collaborative approach to music to me is what's very exciting about music. So to hear that was going on was cool to me.
It's a great song too, and they mention in the book that she's not credited. And I read liner notes not a lot. I don't know if the one I have currently says that if credits her or not, or if there's a dispute between the Rolling Stones. I've never heard it either way. But the fact that they didn't credit her is pretty lame. And she mentioned that she got paid for it and all that kind of stuff. But still, it's pretty lame. And the fact that she recorded it years earlier, and they're like, sorry, you can't. You know, this is too much. And then a male does it.
Women can't say that.
Which is a perfect example of, there's a Cocaine and Rhinestones episode that's all about women and how more of women's songs are banned than men. Women can't talk about being on the pill or this kind of stuff, but a man can talk about beating his wife and doing all these things. And it was a perfect example of that. I mean, times really hadn't changed too much in, 3 years after she sang it.
Well, that was probably very much the same era that you're talking about when Loretta Lynn sang The Pill.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, you totally stole my tangent, damn it.
Sorry.
Cocaine and Rhinestones about that exactly. Is just like she got banned for singing something that it was no problem for a male voice. And exactly like, you know, Loretta Lynn got banned for talking about the pill, and there were 20 other songs by men similar to getting someone pregnant and leaving, which is no problem.
Right. And to me, the song isn't that bad. I mean, I don't feel like even then it should have been considered I just think it's kind of silly.
Jump in, Deb. What were you going to say?
I was going to bring up something that was actually totally not in the right timeline, so I was completely wrong. The song "God Didn't Make Honky Tonk Angels" was
about 10 years earlier.
It was 10 years earlier, but it was a female response to a man's song about loose women being the problem in his life, and she was like, "Well, you're wrong. We have our own side of the story too."
Well, men would never cheat if women didn't just throw their tits at them.
Oh well,
right?
Did you see what she was wearing?
Yes.
I do think the lyrics to Sister Morphine are good. I think she has great potential as a songwriter, and it's weird that
absolutely
she's sitting here covering songs and they're so boring, but
she has her own voice.
To me, reading it, I can totally see how she would be a muse. If you're 19, 20 and you're writing songs and there's this young, beautiful girl that knows all this great stuff about all these great books and things that I've never heard of. Mm-hmm. Just reading it, I was like, ooh, I'd like to write a song about that or this or whatever. I mean, I think I can totally see how she was a muse, and I think she was.
An experience collector, too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I kind of see her as like the beat writers. There's Allen Ginsberg, and I want to know him, and I want to be seen with him. Or some of the Grateful Dead members come over, like Owsley and Pigpen, and they bring some acid with them, and she's like, okay, I want to hang with these guys. Like anybody who had any kind of countercultural reputation, she's just immediately drawn to, you know? So she's just kind of this scene hopper, and that's what interested me most about the book is the other people, not her. And that's almost kind of like her life in some ways, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, who she was with, very interesting, you know, and, you know, who she was able to meet. But like we said, you know, maybe killed her husband, bad mother, bad daughter. I mean...
Yeah, it feels like her story kind of feels like Forrest Gump in the way that if Forrest Gump didn't have his own story, he was just a tourist through the time period. Because so much of Forrest Gump isn't his own life. It's all these little things that happen to him, and he experiences the Vietnam War, and he goes and he lives on a fishing boat or shrimp boat. Shrimp boat. Should not say fishing boat. But yeah, he experiences all these things, but then he also has his own story. And this doesn't feel like she really has her own story for a lot of it.
I love that analogy.
I was trying to think of a Forrest Gump
Life
quote.
is a box of drugs.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a Mandrix.
Sometimes you get a Tuala, whatever the hell that was.
He was mentally disabled by birth, and she was mentally disabled by choice. How about
true.
that?
I like the part where she meets Madonna.
Oh, yeah.
And just looking
And how
at
she
it,
got hungry at the end?
She had a gym in her bathroom.
Yeah, because Madonna's bathroom was as big as this room.
She said everything she did was strange. She was wearing lingerie, and I thought, dear God. But the funniest thing was her kitchen. There was a magazine rack like the ones you see in a dentist's office, but all the magazines on it had her picture on them.
That's awesome.
Well, it's like the Oprah magazine when it first came out. Oh, yeah. Oh. When it first came out, and they had announced like Oprah is going to be on the cover of every single issue, people were like, what sort of narcissistic bullshit is that? And yet it is continuing to be printed. That is many years ago. It is maybe not as sold as the garbage rags and People, but it is definitely up there. And it is mind-blowing to me that somebody can get away with that kind of shit.
Because they're famous.
I wonder though, this is a thought I had when I was reading it. I'm like, okay, so she's been a junkie for, decades, and here she is with these very vivid memories
That
of
really
specific
bothers me.
things, and I'm just like, well, I've taken a lot of drugs, and I can't remember shit from it. All right, and here she is, and she's been,
And these are like totally mind-numbing drugs.
Yeah.
She's talking.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
she has quotes.
And I'm just like,
she's quoting people.
right, exactly. And I'm just like, wait a second, how can she? I can't remember a lot of stuff past 10th grade personally, you know. And she's got like all these details, you know, like Bob Dylan said this to me exactly, you know. And this is in like 65 or 66, and she's writing about this one.
And
this
especially
in like
these
the
are
80s,
all these
right?
are happening
So-
at parties. It's not just that these are conversations that are happening between drug use.
Yeah.
It's that she is actively very, very high when this situation is happening.
Yeah.
And yet she can remember word for word what
really
happened.
good, yeah. So I think a lot of this is constructed memory, which is you know, that's what we do when we remember things. It's like, I don't remember exactly the gist of the conversation, but I think it went like this. Yeah. I also noticed she had, if you didn't know like certain song lyrics, you would think that this is just her writing, but I noted Dylan song lyrics that were not acknowledged all through the whole book.
Something that I thought was really interesting was the idea that everyone's, and she kind of mentions this, everyone's kind of in an open relationship, and that you do whatever you want whenever you want, but then everyone's getting jealous of everyone doing whatever they want, but no one talks about it, which to me it seems like if you're going to have this open relationship and everyone can just have sex with everyone, that you're kind of doing it because you want to feel intimacy with that person and be able to just not feel judged and do whatever you want, when really it had the opposite effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everyone was unhappy and jealous.
Yeah.
But everyone was fucking around.
Well, I felt like her reaction to cheating was very unfair, where she was able to cheat, but when the other person did it, she flew into a wild rage. And one thing that really bothered me was her having a girlfriend that she was banging and that she doesn't really feel is cheating. I actually had a friend that this happened to, where his girlfriend cheated on him with a girl, and she was like, but I was drunk and it was a girl.
My ex used to do that.
And try and tell you that it's not the same thing. Well, because I'm not gay, I just had sex with her. Well, what if you had sex with a man? That would be worse.
I think that's kind of similar to the people I know from like cultures where they're really homophobic, where they're like, there's not really lesbians. I just sometimes hang out with my friend that's a girl and I'm a girl, and sometimes we cuddle and massage each other and kind of
come sometimes.
Kiss and
she gives me a massage and then I come and then I give her a massage and she comes
but
and then we
gays
cuddle
suck,
for a while. But it's not gay.
I love the part in here where she has sex with Keith, you know, and after they have sex, he's pulling on his boots and she's trying to cuddle up to him, and he's like,
oh, it's so magical.
He's like, you know who really likes you? Mick.
This was great and all, but
I don't need
go
that.
call Mick.
Mick likes you a lot. That was a good shag, but I think Keith was like, Mick's a head case. She's a head case. I'm blossoming into a head case. I don't really need this. I need to just focus on myself becoming a head case and not like worry about her, and certainly not about Mick. But I laughed out loud at that part where, you know, she's just like calling him darling and stuff, you know, and says, you know, I'm fluttering around in a state of absolute rapture.
He's such this rebel that wears boots,
Yeah,
and
right.
he wanted me to fuck his best friend.
Right, yeah.
Well, that reminds me of my other favorite part. You were talking about how it seemed like she was really nice to Mick in this book. To me, there was a few parts where I was like, there's no way in hell Mick would allow this. And the one part was they're making love and he starts yelling Keith's name or something, or...
Right, I remember that part as well.
Because he's in
like,
the other room, right?
You know what would be great right now? I wish Keith was here and I would lick his entire body and suck his cock.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Mick would ever admit to that, personally.
Yeah, who knows?
Oh man, I really liked the storyline of the two of them having friends that were another couple, and the guy was very prudish, but the girl was really fun, and that Mick would be in the kitchen cooking when the guy came home, and he would yell, "Oh shit, he's here! Put your clothes on!" And that he would walk in, and then the two girls would jump under the covers and start tossing him around like they were banging, and that he was such a gentleman that he was just like,
Right. You're late for the orgy again.
yeah. Exactly.
The scene that you just talked about, Scott, didn't Marianne present it? Mick knew that Keith could hear him in the next room.
Yeah.
So he was fucking with Keith. He was just like, you know what I'd like to do is really lick Keith from head to toe. And, you know?
There was a lot of insinuating about hopeful homosexual relationship between the two of them, or like a bisexual relationship of the three of them.
Definitely.
And that Mick was always in love with Keith, but was never going to let it be known.
Well, I've never been near any of those people at all, but it is very obvious from a zillion miles away that the primary relationship in those two people's life is Keith and Mick.
Yep.
And anyone else is playing second scene.
Yeah. Yep.
I think the most annoying thing to me in this entire book is it paints a very sparkly perspective of being a junkie. It's like the Mr. Clean version of cleaning your bathroom. It's like the sparkles in the commercial. It has no one scrubbing shit off the floor.
Yeah.
No, the couple of years of her living on, quote, the wall.
And how she preferred it.
Yeah.
She said she liked it.
Had looked forward to it. It was a goal.
And that's where she ended up, in shit. And it's not very easy to live on the streets in a place like England where it freezes every winter fully for a couple of months. There's nothing magical about that. And oh God, when she cut her face,
that seemed to be glossed over as well.
I mean, if she lived on the wall, I had that same question. I was like, you can't be so high that the elements are not affecting you. I mean, you're going to freeze to death if you're living on a wall, no matter how high you are.
it happens in Russia really often that people like fall asleep in alleyways.
Mm-hmm.
She had so many people trying to pick her up. Or the friend that found her in the upstairs bathtub. So her friend took her in when she shouldn't have. The friend who had children.
Mm-hmm.
And she came home to find her in a too hot bathtub. So she was like burnt. And tried to pull, and the tub was overflowing down the stairs.
That's right.
And she tried to pull the plug and slipped and fell and hit her head on the bidet. Not the toilet, the bidet. That's a way to die. Knocked herself out. And at that point, she had ruined the floor in the bathroom, all the way down the stairs and the entryway. Destroyed this house.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck about anything.
I agree with you, John. There's a lot of things that sound like they're not true.
Uh-huh.
Early on, I kind of get an idea that she doesn't make the best of decisions, and she's not the most reliable narrator. So reading it, I kind of just kept that in mind, and I actually enjoyed her perspective, and I don't believe I shouldn't say most. I think she said enough embarrassing things in here that, and she seemed pretty upfront about being promiscuous, which when this book came out, it wasn't necessarily cool to do that as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I give her kudos for that. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot that probably isn't true.
I wonder if she kept like detailed journals and diaries for a while when she was first making the scene and meeting all these famous people. I mean, it could be that she was writing about, what was going on in her life then. I mean, after a while, I don't see how she could keep that up because of her drug habits, but she might have kept a pretty detailed account of her life, especially as a teenager. She's a total literary character in this.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, she's like the narrator. She's like the protagonist. She hits all the right notes in terms of literary references. I think. Like I I noted some of the authors that she mentioned or books, like she's really into Blake, or Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man was something that influenced her, which this book is deeply based on, like structurally. It's just like that James Joyce book. Picture of Dorian Gray she mentions a lot, which I haven't read. French author Céline, who the Beat writers were really into, who is an experimental writer. So to me, she's like putting herself among these works. She's just like, okay, this is kind of, my life is worthy of this type of, fictionalizing memoir mix. It's, has very high standards, I think, as a writer, definitely.
Do you think if she wrote a fictional piece of work that you guys would want to read it?
I don't want to read anything by her anymore.
I think she did write a fictional piece of work, and I read it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If she admitted that it was fiction and it wasn't about herself, I think that it would be very good.
I mean, regardless of what I think of her as a human, I wasn't bored reading this. And I would read stuff and be like, I don't know if that's true, or I think you forgot something. But either way, it evoked some emotion. I didn't read pages and be like, oh, what the hell did I just read? Even the things that were less exciting, I liked her style of writing.
Yep.
With I Shithead, I kind of at times felt like it was just a list of accomplishments. It felt episodical. This felt more like a long-going story. It really got me when her boyfriend jumped. That scene was pretty powerful if you believe her, and if you don't, it's still powerful to see a person who victimizes themselves side of that kind of situation. That was a pretty well written piece.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the part where at the beginning she talks about her grandfather, Theodore Faithfull, who was a sexologist. Which, what year was that? 1900 probably.
Yeah.
A sexologist. That's super intriguing to me because he was probably looked down upon, and he had invented a contrivance called the frigidity machine. And
it's a vibrator.
It says it would unblock the primal libidinal energy,
vibrator,
and a new golden age would be set free.
So at the turn of the century and early on with electricity, there was also this other mindset going on with the fact that men in particular thought that craziness in women was caused by the womb, which is hence the term of a hysterectomy, takes out the hysteria. And one way to help that along is, create these giant electrical devices that create orgasms. Also known today as a dildo or a vibrator, which a sexologist like this gentleman, that's exactly what I thought.
Is that what the machine is?
That's it's what it sounded like to me when I read it.
The name sounds opposite of frigidity. Is it to get rid
but
of
it
frigidity?
Increases libido, even though he says it differently.
Okay. Sorry.
So it's getting rid of frigidity, it must be.
Right.
Anti-frigidity machine.
Yeah.
No, you used to be able to get orgasms prescribed by your doctor, and you had to go to the doctor, get up in the stirrups, and have him perform an orgasm on you.
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
No.
with
Yes.
a medical device.
Yes.
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 With a medical device. Which
During
was
the days
a
of
plug-in.
hysteria.
Yeah. You got to go to the doctor and get an orgasm so you'll calm the fuck down because you're being an obnoxious bitch right now.
Right. You need to go to the doctor. Okay.
Well,
how hard would that be for you to say, okay?
No, for me it would not be because I don't want to be put in stirrups in a medical gown and have somebody perform an orgasm on me.
But do you think that...
do it in my bedroom with my lover, not have my doctor do it.
Not so
to
sterile.
Me. Yeah. I mean, I imagine too at the time when only your husband and your doctor
What
ever
year
sees
was
you
this?
above the knee.
In the aught years.
Yeah.
Last century.
Okay.
Even
the
the Catholic Church prescribed, clitoral massage for releasing frustration.
Early Sears catalogs.
It's Victorian
had
era.
them.
That's like late Victorian era then, yeah.
Early Sears catalogs sold vibrators, plug-in vibrators for calming hysteria and for relieving the nerves of a woman.
Not just for breakfast anymore.
But that to me is a little different than, I mean, they're so religious and so uptight about stuff. The fact that they would let someone else take care of that just seems...
Well, it's a medical need that you have to fix.
That's how you get hooked on pills when you're a country musician. The doctor
Did they
gave
think
it to
it was
me.
not connected to intercourse?
No, it's not intercourse.
They need the downers.
It's not
You've been
intercourse.
up too long. You
It's
should
the-
take some sleep.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that whole thing was just a pervy doctor being like, I want to touch all these women and I need a reason.
I'm no gynecologist, but I'll take a look.
That's why I'll never trust a male gynecologist.
It is the gynecologists that I've met that are men, they seem really gross to me. And you know that they talk about everything to their buddies.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
Something else I found interesting was she mentions, I'd heard she'd, speaking of her mom, had an incestuous relationship with her brother, for instance, and I wanted to know how that had affected her, and her mom wouldn't talk about it.
Sorry, I just got some information from our researcher here. Apparently, the vibrators were invented because the doctor's hands got tired.
Huh.
So that's pretty amazing.
How would your hand get tired?
Well, because all night you're diddling clits, and of course
That's
you're
like
gonna
my
get...
dream.
Until you're paid for it.
Tap me out here. I'm getting tired.
I mean, there's two hands. You just go back and
I don't.
forth.
Wax
I'm not
on,
ambidextrous.
wax off.
I couldn't do it with my left hand if somebody paid me.
Who invented the dildo?
That's a good question.
Is there a
Mr.
black and white
Mr.
photo
Dildo.
of like someone like Thomas Edison standing next to him?
I have read in my research that the dildo goes back very, very far in history, and ancient civilizations have like early ceramics and.
Joe, is there a dildo museum somewhere in the world?
There actually is. There's in Japan. There's the dildo. There's like the fertility
Korea.
festival. Well,
there's
Korea
the dildo
has one
park
too.
in Korea.
But yeah, that's in. I'm pretty sure you're right that one's in Korea. But in Japan, there's a fertility festival where there's dick-shaped everything, dick-shaped candy, dick-shaped pastries, dick-shaped toys, and then there are these huge, massive dicks that they like carry through the streets that are like big trees that they've carved into dicks, and then there's the shrine that's just nothing but dicks, and you like put flowers on them, and you like touch the dicks, and you kiss the dicks, and you like pray to the dicks to get pregnant. Like women who are trying to have children go and like rub the wooden and rock dicks to like get pregnant.
Why isn't that in a Marianne Faithfull experience? You would seem like that would be of all the experience collections that they were looking for.
That's right.
And there's more research coming in.
Oh, geez. 100 years ago, the vibrator was invented to relieve doctors whose fingers were frequently cramped from treating quote-unquote hysteria in female patients.
This is
Afterwards, it became a
insane to
popular
me.
household appliance.
You have never heard this.
I haven't
Women
either.
to get off
No,
on their
me
own.
either.
No, the whole Sears... Thank you, researcher. The whole Sears catalog thing where you could get a dildo through the Sears catalog, sorry, not a dildo, but a vibrator, was that the doctor was already prescribing this treatment for you. And if you got it through the Sears catalog, you were buying a medical appliance to help you deal with your unbalanced humors.
The original Mother's Little Helper.
Yeah, before the pills.
You've never heard that. You've never heard of hysteria.
Mommy, where are my
You've never
shoes?
heard of medical prescriptions.
I'm taking my
No,
medicine.
I haven't heard of the doctor-induced orgasms, but I have heard of the hysteria related to hysterectomy and
taking
having
the
your
crazy
womb out.
out.
Sure, yeah, definitely. But no, not the doctor-induced orgasms.
Yeah.
No.
Isn't there a documentary
Think about my mom's doctor growing up, our family doctor, and it just kind of is just so strange to think. I'm just
All
like,
of a sudden.
For some reason, my my normal doctor, which is not supposed to do like gynecological stuff, I imagine, those beds all have stirrups, and I'm always very curious as to why my general practitioner needs stirrups.
He's like, I'll throw it in for free.
Yeah, I'll take a look if you want me to.
Free of charge. I'm saving you like $300.
Ear, nose, and throat visit? Into the stirrups.
Ear, nose, and vagina.
I do want to bring up the Roy Orbison episode. I thought that was so funny. She's like, "Hi, Roy. How's it going?" "I'm in room 606, baby." And that's it. And he just like walks by. That's it. That's like the whole.
My expectation is you will be joining me in room 606.
That's hilarious though. But she she sleeps with Gene Pitney, and then Roy's like, "My turn," and it's like, "Nope, I guess not." So, a man of few words.
I did appreciate how she phonetically spelled most of the slang.
Uh-huh.
Baby.
Yeah.
British people can tell you what street you were born on based on the way you talk. And the way that she spells it out, I thought was really adorable.
I liked little tidbits like this. So she says, Brian's bust was the work of the infamous Detective Sergeant Norman Pilcher, the Semolina Pilcher in John Lennon's I Am a Walrus. And then she goes on to talk about this infamous detective. But I just like stuff like that because I'd never thought twice about where that came from. And I've read a lot of Beatles stuff that never mentioned that too.
Right.
So one thing she said there at least twice was that Mick wanted to be John Lennon.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that he wanted to be John Lennon.
Yeah.
Was that new to anyone?
Do you think it's like fair to think of it this way? Like Mick is kind of bubblegum at that time, and John Lennon has some pretty significant substance as a songwriter.
Does he?
I think so. I mean, during that time period, I think so, definitely. Compared to like when the Stones started out, Mick was kind of he had the schoolboy thing going.
Yeah.
John became kind of a heavy pretty quickly, I think, in terms of the material that he started to write. So maybe it was a credibility thing. Maybe she built it up more than it was. But I can see Mick wanting to be taken more seriously at a certain point in the 60s than he was. And John Lennon was really taken pretty seriously, by the press.
What time did she say this? What part of his career? Mid-60s?
Yes.
Being obsessed with music and reading about my favorite bands, what I've learned is there'll be an interview with some musician I like when they're 19 about how they love this band and how they think they're the greatest. And then 2 or 3 years later, they change their opinion on that, or that was just who they were into at the time, or they think of 80 other musicians the same way. I think at that point, the Beatles were the first to kind of go in their own direction and do less covers. And I think that's what Mick saw that he wanted to do, is he wanted to head in that direction. That's exactly what he did. And there's a few years there where he's kind of following the Beatles, and then after that he's kind of following these other bands from the States.
That makes sense.
Because generally when you read about Mick and Keith and the music they were into, it's pretty much all black artists. And during the 60s.
Yeah.
And then 70s it kind of changes, and by the 80s they're mentioning pop artists and stuff that they like. But
Right, yeah, it's clear that they were constantly listening to and aware of what was popular. Because, like I said, their Satanic Majesty's Request.
I think it's great.
Isn't that their Sgt. Pepper?
I'm not saying it's bad.
It came out right after Sgt. Pepper.
Right.
I'm not
Okay,
saying
yeah.
it's bad. It's just a clear reflection. It's not. I wouldn't call that album original.
Well, then they made those country records, right? I mean, there's a little Graham Parsons stuff in here. But
I had no idea Graham Parsons played with them.
Oh, they sought him out. Keith wanted what's that steel guitar you have? The American? No, what's that metal guitar you have?
Yes, the National.
National, yeah. So Keith wanted a National really badly, and somebody cooked him up with Graham when they were in L.A., and Graham got him a really nice one. And then Mick and Keith wanted Graham to show them how to play country western. And so that's how they hooked up with him. But he was playing with them a lot during the Let It Bleed sessions.
Yeah.
And they were junking, and Keith and he were junkies together.
Yeah, I think that the Beatles and the Stones were kind of, the same with the Beach Boys. It was like the Beatles made this album. The Beach Boys tried to make an album better than that and take influence from that, and then the Beatles tried to copy the Beach Boys. It seemed like that was going on a lot with musicians then, because everything was new and people were instantly taking influence on something new that had come out.
Well, there were 3 stations.
Yeah, not a lot to listen to.
What was this? Does anybody remember this scene where maybe she's at somebody's mansion, and this drunk band shows up to jam? Was it like the Small Faces? The Faces? Small Faces, or a Bachelorette episode?
Yeah.
It's, a drunken band has showed up on the beach. I loved how they were characterized, though. She was just like these drunken lads who are just all about, jamming, and they show up and they just want to play music and like party, and they ruin the night.
Yeah.
That's how I picture the Faces, the Small Faces. I mean, those guys were just blasted out of their minds all the time.
I liked a lot of the little, and I kind of might have mentioned this, but the little moments where she just briefly mentions, I was hanging out with so-and-so when we threw on this record. It's kind of interesting to hear a lot of my favorite musicians listen to this record, or thinking, oh, this is maybe the 5th time they've heard this record, and they took influence by the way this sounded or that sounded. Because I feel like today a lot of artists that you hear about that are popular, it doesn't seem magical that they're listening to some album that we've all heard a million times.
It kind of reminds me of like when I was younger, a friend would buy the record, like I just bought X record. You got to come over and listen to it, and I don't know how much that really happens anymore.
Oh, absolutely not. No, you send somebody a text message.
Yeah,
but
download
it and listen to it.
But it used to be
headset.
like, you'd be like, oh, so and so, has the new, Ultravox record, and oh, cool. First I want to tape it from him, right? As soon as I can, and usually the person would have to hold on to the record for at least a week before they'd give it up for you to tape. But the other option was you'd go over to that person's bedroom and you'd listen to the record with them and talk about the record, while you were listening to it. And that was really, I think, a cool hands-on experience. And that's obviously what they were doing with like every new release that was coming out at the time.
No one's saying, hey, Greg, come on in. Let's check out the new Drake album in the bedroom.
Right. And play it over and over.
The new
too.
Nicki Minaj.
Yeah.
It is weird to think, though, that you could invite a friend to come to your house, to drive all the way over, you just sit there and you enjoy a new album and look at the cover. Whereas now, I can send my friend a YouTube video that's 1.5 minutes, and a year later I'll be like, did you ever listen to that 1.5 minute video? I didn't have time to get around to it.
Yeah.
That's how different things have gotten.
I think in some ways, like listening to records like we were talking about, like going over to a friend's house, it was the closest thing you could do to like go and see that band in concert at the time. So, if the Pretenders were not on tour and they got a new record out, they're not going to be around for a year. You're with friends listening to the Pretenders record, on your boombox. You're excited about it. Then you have the live album also replacing the live experience. And they're like these kind of group activities, whereas now music to me is more for solitary listening, it seems. More for personal, listening.
Back to the Dylan, though, I did think that was pretty narcissistic of Dylan to play his own record and
analyze.
Absolutely.
Not to say that he's not. I kind of picture Dylan as being crazy, and I'm not really surprised by a lot of what he does, but I almost feel like Dylan would be the kind of person where he would record an album and never listen to it again for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just especially being as prolific as he was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was funny. What'd you guys think about, forget her last name, Anita
Pallenberg?
Is that the one she mentions the whole time?
Isn't that Keith's? Yeah. It's Keith's main squeeze, right?
It seemed, of all the people, it seemed like she was the one that she never said anything negative about. Like,
right?
It seemed to me like they were more friends the time this book was written.
Yeah. And sometimes we did drugs together and she'd get a little bit too into it, but other than that, everything was great.
Dave, your cat loves art.
Yeah.
Just staring at it.
Trying to figure out the
Point of that
What does this mean?
Is this postmodern?
He's a big street art fan.
So she mentioned a lot of acting roles she was in. She seemed not too proud of most of that, so you know that it's got to be awful. Yeah. I really want to just see clips of just a little bit of each like movie she did, because it sounded like it was pretty bad. Well, I feel like I've seen the one with Mick. I don't remember it, but
what was the one with Mick? Do you remember the title?
The one that was supposed to be like a representation of his life.
Or...
Yeah.
Okay.
And once again, it was like she got that role because she was attractive.
Yeah.
And a socialite.
Yeah. And lots of times because she was famous. I mean, if she was, 700 pounds and poor, we wouldn't be reading this right now.
Right.
God, after her and Mick broke up, and then she gained a bunch of weight. I looked up how much she weighed at that time and how much weight she gained. It was, okay, so the British, they speak in stones.
Stones, yeah, or kilos,
which is
right?
Really frustrating because the only time you ever refer to things in stones is when you're referring to a person's weight.
They're like, pleased
so
to meet you.
it's a whole other thing to need to know. But no, she was still of a relatively healthy weight. It's just that she wasn't a friggin' anorexic. I mean, when her friggin' jaw breaks.
Yeah.
And that's from drug use, but the main reason there is because of lack of nutrients from not eating. But that is, if you're an addict, that's a big part of healing, is you need to heal that too. They say that, a girl is thin when you can see her collarbones and sick when they're dipping.
I've never heard that.
Hollow-eyed.
Girls check out their collarbones a lot.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a big deal to, if you're trying to be thin, to have good collarbones.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those goals, like thigh gap.
Right.
So do you think sleeping with 3 Rolling Stones is that great of a feat, or do you think numerous
I'm
people
sure
have done
many ladies can claim that.
She had a pretty significant relationship with Mick, right?
But if we're just talking about
The fact that she banged 3 stones.
quantity,
Quantity of stones. How many stones? She
Pamela
fit inside?
DeBar has her beat. You
Who?
know, Pamela DeBar.
Who's that?
I'm with the band, the famous LA groupie.
Yeah.
Pamela DeBar. She's slept with everybody. She was in this group called GTO, Girls Together Outrageously, and these were LA groupies who were always just anyone came to town. They're at the hotel, they're feeding them, they're having sex with them. And actually, I'd like to read her memoir. But if we're talking about impressiveness in terms of sleeping with the Rolling Stones or whoever, I think Pamela DeBar says she's got everybody beat.
When I was in college and I was in a band, if one of my bandmates had a crush on someone or whatever, that person was off limits.
Not me.
Well, yeah, but you don't have panties getting thrown at you.
So I shouldn't be calling Sarah.
Definitely not me.
Yeah, if you're in the band, you're not allowed to.
And Joe's off limits too, Deb?
Well, depends. If I'm allowed to watch.
Okay.
Wait, am I allowed to go after Sarah?
No.
Ah, shit.
In my early band days,
Can we all watch?
I kind of just had this attitude oh, well, so-and-so already slept with Rob, so I'll probably sleep with her too, it wasn't kind of a competitive thing. It was just, I'd like to sleep with her if I get a chance, and then there would be the chance, and I would sleep with her after another band member had already slept with her. That seemed pretty normal to me.
The reason you like people is because you have things in common, so it's not strange to me oh, well, I think Joe is hot too, Deb.
Are you saying you want to fuck Joe?
Yeah, he is.
More than once I've said that.
Yeah, he is.
Did you not pick up
the
on
first
that
time
earlier?
Outright. He's saying he wants to bang my husband. Yep, yeah. I'm okay with it.
There's this guy that I met when I was in the military that was like, when I break up with my girlfriend, you do too. Talking about his friends. I just thought that was funny that he said that.
Well, what's the difference between a hippie and a punk?
What?
Hippies don't hate punks.
That's a good one. Somebody at the Ween.
That didn't seem very.
Someone at the Ween concert walked up to me and said, "What's the difference between hard rock and jam rock?" Trying to think about it, and then I was like, I don't know. What is it? I thought there was a punchline or something, and he was really asking me what the difference was, and I was just like, oh, that was a real question.
Were you guys surprised that she made such boring music in the 60s? She was well-read. She knew about hip music. She knew all these things. But the music she was making, she would easily compromise on that, which didn't seem like how she was otherwise. Because I could understand doing a single or one album, but she did a decent amount of work that was just totally boring.
Your cat just cut him off.
Do you think she's an original? I mean, do you think she's an original artist?
I think she had a couple of songs that she wrote. I think that Sister Morphine is a great song that she wrote.
Definitely.
I think that everything else was luck.
Mm-hmm.
Luck and tits.
She does seem very similar to Nico.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I first heard Nico, I was like, who is this? I mean, she sounded so interesting. But then when I've read stuff about her, it seemed very blah.
She's beautiful. She can sing in a way that's original. Like, only she sings that way.
Right. I think she has a lot more layers than Nico. I think she's smarter.
I don't know a lot.
She has more potential.
I can't sense any real specialness as a quality to her as an artist.
She's got a good immune system.
Yes, right.
Like you said earlier, it wasn't necessarily a Marianne Faithfull story, just a story about the scene, and she was fortunate to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, she was Forrest Gump. She was a big-breasted, drug-fervored.
Was she big-breasted?
The first time I ever heard about her or really paid attention, it quoted someone in the Stones or...
It was Andrew Luke Oldham.
Maybe, she's an angel with big tits.
Okay,
yeah.
I gotcha.
And that they had written a lot of songs about her in the Stones. And to me, hearing any band that writes a lot of songs that are influenced or inspired or whatever by one person, to me is very interesting.
Is she like a more literate Courtney Love?
Oh,
That's
God,
the worst
no.
thing you could say about
I hope not.
We mention Courtney Love every time. Did he write any songs about Courtney Love?
Michael Stipe?
No.
Mick Jagger?
Keith.
Marianne Faithfull?
Keith. We're talking about Keith, obviously, right?
No, Kurt. Do you think he wrote any songs about
Definitely.
Courtney Love?
Sure. Heart-Shaped Box is supposed to be about
I think
this
Hank Williams wrote all his songs about
box
Courtney
of
Love.
heroin that she used to keep tar heroin in this heart-shaped box. All Apologies. What's that one song? Like, married, buried.
Yeah.
That might be about her.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so, but I feel like he was pretty much in love with her by the time that album came out. What's so crazy is that you know that had he lived another week or month or what day, they were going to divorce anytime.
Yeah.
And the fact that she got complete control over everything and released like the shitty box set and released the shitty diary, and they didn't have like a proper greatest hits and release of all this, and then it wasn't really archived well, is just insane that she just got everything.
So we're going to read a Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain book next so
No,
we
'cause
can
I'll
actually
get
cut this
angry.
off, and because I don't know any of that, and maybe we could just
well,
use
if you
this
don't
last
know
half
about
as the
that
next
story,
podcast.
man.
Like Superman 1 and 2.
Yes.
You know that one?
Yes. All right. I personally didn't love this.
I don't like her.
Her stories, definitely about other people, were the highlights. She filled in some gaps, you know. I read Keith's A Life, and the stories that she told about Keith. Keith did not tell about himself in that, so that kind of filled in some gaps for me, definitely. I loved reading the Bob Dylan stuff. So for me, as into Dylan as I am, the best part of this book was all of the Dylan. And then a lot of the other stuff I thought was fairly pretentious. You know, that was one thing that bothered me about the book, is it felt a little pretentious at times.
Do you think she is normally pretentious? Do you think that's how other people saw her in the rock scene, is, oh, she's intelligent, but she was just trying too hard?
It could be, you know, definitely.
You can't date a famous rock star and expect that it's going to last, and she just continually dated rock stars. So whether it be her fault or their fault or both, it's like, oh, that's going to be a disaster. This is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And she plays it off like, oh, everyone was sleeping with each other, whatever. Sounds like everyone was affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And it, at first you're reading it and you're like, oh, that's like my dream life. And it's just sounded like everyone was miserable.
I'm going to wrap it. I moved to rap.
We sign cars.
Rap.
Goodbye. See you later. Gotta see you go, 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 go. Goodbye. See you around. The bend. The farewell bend.
I just immediately go boom boom in your panties.
Did you say our top story is we go boom boom in our panties?
Yeah.
There's dick-shaped everything, dick-shaped candy, dick-shaped pastries, dick-shaped toys, and then there are these huge, massive dicks that they like carry through the streets that are like big trees that they've carved into dicks, and then there's the shrine that's just nothing but dicks, and you like put flowers on them, and you like touch the dicks, and you kiss the dicks, and you like pray to the dicks to get pregnant.